Good morning. It is May 19, 2023, and we are finally starting to get the first sensations of warm weather starting to appear. Hopefully that frost that we saw in the Cleveland and Northern Ohio area yesterday didn't do any large-scale damage. I know it has been restricting some of the bent grasses in particular as far as growing and getting going after the winter. It's been a little bit of a strange spring from that standpoint. Soil temperatures for bent grasses generally want to be above 55 degrees. Maybe those newer cultivars that are coming online may do a little bit better, but for some of the cultivars that were released in the early 2000s, you want average soil temperatures to be above 55 degrees, and I would suggest that they need to be above 55 for a period of time. Regardless of that, online today we got Dr. David Gardner, Dr. Tyler Carr, Dr. David Shetlar, and the inimitable Mr. Todd Hicks. Dr. Gardner, take it away.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Well, unless you're watching this in the evening, and then, good evening, everybody. So before I start, I was reminded that we're in the middle of the season where we're spraying broadleaf weeds, and it's going to get warmer next week. And so if you have been using ester formulations of herbicides, some of those are formulated in such way that they're still reasonably safe as the temperatures increase. But generally speaking, spraying those in and around ornamental plants when temperatures are above 80 degrees is something that, it can be kind of risky to do. It's not just the off-target movement to the ornamentals, but sometimes when you have hotter weather, it also makes it so that the herbicide spray dries on the weed more quickly. And so you actually end up getting less control. My point is check the formulation of your herbicide and make sure that you're using either an ester that's designed for warmer weather, but still be careful in warmer temperatures, or switch to the amine-based formulation, okay? So what I was going to talk about this week is actually this beautiful plant here. So this is Japanese knotweed. It's actually an invasive species that's been in Ohio for quite a few years now. This photograph I lifted from the Knox County Extension website. I didn't know how to cite it properly, so I put their email address or their web address there in a desperate bid to not get in trouble or whatever for stealing their image. But my point is that it's an invasive plant. Personally, I think it's kind of pretty. It's the perfect complement to Bradford pear and honeysuckle in our landscapes, maybe with a little bit of garlic mustard as the ground cover. But most people consider this plant a problem. Okay, now it's been in Ohio for quite some time, but usually it's along riverbanks, roadsides, woodlands. It's a semi-woody plant, 3 to 10 feet in height. It's got alternate egg-shaped 4 to 6 inch leaves. Anyway, if you look at all of this, you're like, why are you talking about this if you're supposed to be talking about turfgrass? Well, because lo and behold, we're starting to see this popping up in turf. Okay, and so this is actually out of a lawn in Upper Arlington, a suburb of Columbus. And so this is something that potentially may start to become a problem in our lawn environments. And so one of the issues with this plant is that it has a very vigorous rhizome system. So kind of like Candida thistle, but yet more aggressive than that. And so if you see this plant, the first thing that you want to do is get right on top of getting rid of it. Glyphosate if it's in a landscaping bed, triclopyr, you can try triclopyr if it's in a lawn environment. But as far as how to actually manage it, that's something that I'm a little bit confused on because, well, I don't know, I was looking at the internet for ideas for how to manage it, and how the internet can be kind of not so reliable when it comes to answering your questions. Some of the websites said that mowing this will actually make the problem worse because it'll spread all of the pieces of plants around and they'll re-sprout. But then other websites said no, it's only pieces of the rhizome that are capable of re-sprouting. So if you go to remove this plant, make sure that you're getting all of the rhizomes out. I think based on my understanding of this, mowing could be an effective strategy. The idea being if you mow it regularly, you're going to eventually weaken the rhizome system. But, the best thing is if you see this plant, physically removing it as quickly as possible before it starts to look, more like this. Is something that you'll want to pay attention to. Again, not necessarily widespread in lawns yet, but this has been in Ohio for quite a few years. And I did get this photograph sent to me 2 days ago. Now, the other popular common question that I got this week is something along the lines of, what is this grass? And so we're right about that time of the year where things like quackgrass and orchard grass and rough bluegrass are still pretty visible in our turf surfaces, because all of these grasses tend to green up and grow a little bit more rapidly during April and May compared to Kentucky bluegrass and perennial ryegrass. Now, in the month of June, this all kind of balances out. And I don't want to say that these plants go away, but they become less noticeable in a managed lawn system. But, quackgrass has the very easy to recognize clasping auricle. Orchard grass has the very easy to recognize tall ligule. Rough bluegrass has a variety of characteristics that make it also fairly easy to recognize, not the least of which is its yellower, more yellowish color and relatively faster growth rate. But the bad news with all of these is that really the only option that you have is glyphosate, and then you have to reestablish either, with patches of sod or reseed. But again, I got a lot of calls this week or pictures sent to me with various specimens of primarily these grasses. Remember, in a mowed environment, there's only so many plants that are capable of withstanding repeated mowing, so that kind of limits the number of possibilities. But unfortunately, a lot of these tend to be perennials, and so the question arises: is there a pre-emergence that I can put down to make this not come in next year? And it's like, no, it's already there. Or is there a post-emergence that will selectively remove this and spare the turf grass? And the answer again is no. Unfortunately, the only options really are glyphosate and then perhaps glufosinate, but glyphosate is the one that we know tends to have a better chance of translocating all throughout those parts of the plant that make it a perennial, and so that you're probably going to get better control with that herbicide. And that's what I have for this week.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. A whole lot of doom and gloom there. Appreciate it. Next up, Dr. Carr.
All right, so I think we're gonna have a pretty good theme here today of incoming warm weather. I think in most of the state, we're gonna hit the 80s next week. Maybe not up where you're at in Cleveland, Dr. Nangle, maybe close to 80, I think. But maybe upper 80s in southwestern Ohio. So when we think about those temperatures, we're also, in the summer, we have more humid conditions. Looking ahead, our dew points aren't gonna be any higher than the low 50s. And so we're going to be losing a lot of water from evapotranspiration. So that's the combined effects of evaporation from the soil and transpiration, which is what's lost from the plants through their metabolic processes. So that's going to be around 1.4 to 1.5 inches, kind of depending on where you are in the state for the next week, starting today. Typically, we recommend irrigating cool season grasses to about 80% of that value. So if we do that on a daily basis, that comes out to about 0.16 to 0.18 inches per day. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and put that amount of water out every day on your lawn. Really, when the temperatures are getting warmer, there's a tendency to go out and switch that irrigation controller to on and just set it and irrigate it every couple days or every day. But really, we want to go out and only irrigate when we're seeing drought stress symptoms. That can be purpling or graying of the leaves. And if you step on these leaves, they won't bounce back. I'm not saying to do that on our sand-based systems or our closely mown systems like athletic fields or golf courses. But for lawns, this is a good recommendation for now. So instead of just irrigating on a schedule, we can use the ET values that we have to help us determine how much water to put out when it's time to irrigate. And so if you notice some drought stress symptoms, go out the following morning. We typically like to irrigate in the morning, early morning hours, and replace some of that water that's been lost. And those ET values, again, can help you determine that. Now, that would require an audit of your irrigation system to help you to determine how much water you're actually putting out. I often like to go take some old tuna cans, spread it throughout the yard, run your irrigation for a certain amount of time, and measure the depth at which that water is accumulating, and we can determine how many inches of water being put out over a certain time period. But if you want to set it and forget it, there are some tools out there that you can connect to your irrigation system. There are soil moisture sensors that directly connect to either your controller or valves. And this essentially allows you to define a moisture content in your soil. Whereas when the soil moisture drops below that threshold, your irrigation will kick on for the next cycle. Otherwise, it will skip it. There are other smart controllers which take historical weather data and current data around your area to determine when your lawn needs to be irrigated. So there are some manual options. Our visual drought stress symptoms, but there are also some tools that can be cost effective in the long run. And if you want to just set it and forget it. So that's all I have, guys.
Tyler, I guess Dave has his mouth open. Dave first.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if this would add to the conversation, but I would share my screen real quick and point out that the National Weather Service, the Climate Prediction Center, as of yesterday, shaded this part of the country and said that there's a risk of rapid onset drought. So that does cover parts of Southwest Ohio, and that's for the period May 26th through June 1st. So, late next week to the following week.
Yeah, I mean, and so these grasses, especially our bluegrasses, if you don't irrigate them, one of their drought avoidance mechanisms is going into early dormancy. So if you're okay with it going a little brown, I mean, we'll get rain. We're going to have below average rainfall over the next 2 weeks, but we're going to get rain at some point, and it will bounce back quickly. But just know that yeah, we will be in a deficit over the next few weeks, especially in that southwestern part of the state.
So, Dr. Carr, in your expert opinion, I know you've done some work on this. Was there an ability to measure cost savings with the use of these sensors?
Yes, one of my colleagues at University of Arkansas, Dan Sandor, did some work on Bermuda grass. That the cost savings were more at this point for the soil moisture sensors. He didn't do any work on the smart controllers, but the return on investment, I want to say, was pretty substantial. So you could look up his work if you just, I think it's if you type in Dan Sandor and irrigation controllers or irrigation soil moisture sensors. I can also post that link in the show notes for those interested. But that work needs to be done on cool season grass, so that would be helpful for our stakeholders.
Interesting. I think most homeowners and entities installing stuff, if they can show a return on investment, would probably have much greater success with the sensors. Okay.
The Franklin County Soil Water, what's the conservation district? I'm losing their name.
Soil Water
Franklin's.
District.
I believe they give out free soil moisture sensors. Last I spoke with them, I think they have boxes of soil moisture sensors. I'm not sure what brand they are, but that could be an option for some people in Franklin County.
Nice. Make use of that, folks. All right. With more death and destruction of a fungal type, Mr. Todd Hicks.
Thanks, Ed. Good day, everybody. Obviously, everyone's speaking about the warmer weather patterns that we are experiencing and will experience over the holiday weekends, which brings great joy to pathologists everywhere, not so much to you folks managing turf. Right now at the turf center, we have lots of leaf spot eating away. Red thread is really ramping up and becoming an issue. And we have already had a minor outbreak of dollar spot, which is about 2.5 weeks early for us in Central Ohio, at least at the turf center. So I'm guessing everyone else has experienced the same thing from the folks I've talked to or heard back from. I think it's going to be real important to take a look at your spray schedule and make sure you are really covered well for the Memorial Day weekend. I think we're really going to shift into warm weather, and a lot of diseases are really going to get a chance to explode if you're not covered. The top 3 ones that I'm wary of right now, obviously dollar spot, since we're already seeing and hearing about it in several places. That's going to be a major one. Leaf spot, even if you haven't identified it yet, I'm guessing it's there and chewing away minor and waiting for its chance, which is coming up. And if you're managing a POA and you had trouble last year with anthracnose, that's another one that's going to come and bite you. You do not want to start the beginning of summer already behind diseases and fighting the rest of the way. So make sure your spray is good in coverage, and sleep well and have a great holiday weekend and start the summer out right. That's what we're seeing so far, Ed.
Todd, would you comment also on, for the homeowners at least that do have irrigation systems, the best time to do that irrigation to avoid increasing weed incidents during this, or disease incidents during this warm period?
Well, obviously in the mornings, you don't want to start off with leaf wetness all morning long. You want to shorten it up. So the best times to do that, evening, overnight, way early in the morning is not a bad time to wash that dew invitation water off, but don't do it during the day. Don't do it late in the morning. You want to get those leaf surfaces dry as quick as possible, because most of our spreading of turf diseases is due to moisture on the leaf surface.
Yeah, we noticed some leaf spot, Todd, on the ODA trial up in Munster. It was really, particularly on the ryegrass, it was starting to thin it out, and it was like, wow, that's showing some
I
difference.
got some pictures from a golf course 2 days ago that was really had that classic melting away look. And it's only one instance, but it's everywhere on ryegrass. I've seen it on bluegrass, not a lot on bent, but like I said, I did get some pictures in a phone call 2 days ago. And so it's out there. You know, leaf spot's one of my favorites because we have 2 kinds. One likes cool season, one likes warm season. In my opinion, the warm season is a little more drastic, and it just needs water, and we've had plenty of water. So I think the warm season one will kick in with this weather pattern. And we've got some intermittent rain throughout Ohio here in the next 7 to 10 days. So it's right to cause a problem.
Awesome. Death and destruction all around.
Things that make us happy.
All right. Dr. Shetlar, winged problems.
Okay, let's see if I can bring this one up. Had kind of an interesting inquiry this last week from one of the distributors. He had a customer that had sent him some pictures of some worms that were out, and I believe it was in a lawn. And when I took a look at it, I said, well, number one, they're not worms. Earthworms are totally different. They're not caterpillars. And what he had sent me was a picture of the grass-eating sawfly. Now, the adults of these are little black wasp-like insects that come out pretty early in the season, but they can be active basically from February up into early May, seeking out grasses to lay their eggs on, and then the larvae will nibble on them. You can see that they are sort of caterpillar-like, but if you count the pro legs, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Anytime you get past 5 pairs of pro legs, you are no longer dealing with a caterpillar. You're dealing with a sawfly, and so these are I consider sort of a minor curiosities, more of a nuisance. I've never seen them cause any extensive damage. The larvae usually come out at nighttime. They prefer to feed on what we would consider to be weedy grasses, things like quackgrass. I've seen them also on wild type tall fescues and so forth, but they will eat on some of our cultivated grasses. They will come out also on cool, shady days when we've got a sort of heavy cloud overcast, which we've had over the last couple of weeks. They can come out during that time and feed. Don't recommend any controls for these. If you think you need to throw something at them, a pyrethroid would take them out pretty rapidly. The cool weather that we had recently really slowed down the bluegrass billbug egg laying. And I've noticed that at least in my neighborhood, a lot of the cool season grasses are trying to set seeds. And so they're sending up those little thick seed head stems. That's what the female bluegrass billbug prefers to lay her eggs in. So it's prime egg laying time for the bluegrass billbug. So if you haven't put down something, if you think you're at risk for billbugs, I think you could still do that. My recommendation is, again, since it's getting a little bit later, so really kind of an early curative, one of the neonicotinoids would be best. Clothianidin or Arena has performed the best for me, but imidacloprid and thiamethoxam would also work. The problem with putting imidacloprid and thiamethoxam down here in May means that it will run out of steam. The residual capability of that will run out by the time that we get to July, when the normal annual white grubs are beginning to hatch. Speaking of white grubs, I'm getting a little concerned about our weather. Remember, for the last 5 years, we've had wetter than normal Mays, and it looks out like this May is going to be drier than normal. Now, why would that influence the white grubs? It's been my contention that saturated soils, if you get a rainfall event that saturates the soil for a 2 to 3 day period, when the white grubs are in the pupal stage, those pupae can drown. Actually, I don't think they drown, they suffocate. They run out of oxygen and will die. So when we have this slightly drier than normal period, when those Japanese beetles and mass chafers and some of the other white grub species are in the pupal stage, they're going to survive just fine. And so this may be the year that our white grub population begins to build back up. It's been suppressed for the last couple of years, but it may be the time that they're going to build back up in their populations. And so just because you didn't see any grub damage for the last couple of years doesn't mean that this year is going to be the same. It looks like the weather conditions are changing and may be good for white grub survival. Okay, that's all I've got, Ed.
It was very foreboding, David. I don't like that. For some people, like, hey, so you've gone from drowning them to giving them all the opportunities in the world to survive. That sounds very, very good. One last thing to follow up from me, and just a quick screen share on it. So this week I came across a home lawn setting where the homeowner had said they had gone to treat moss, and it looks like they treated everything and the moss. The reason I bring this up is, and both from a professional and a homeowner side, if you're watching this video, folks, make sure you're aware of what is on the label. On the professional side of it, the label is the law, and for a majority of the materials on the homeowners, if it is or does have an EPA registration, then that same process needs to be applied in your mindset. So if you don't follow what the label says or tells you what the product should be used for, then you're going to be out of luck. Now, we're not quite sure what exactly happened here. The suspicion is that the homeowner used a product that was designed for moss control on things like concrete, but definitely not moss control on things like grass. So it's not the fault of the company. This one is going to be for the idea of the homeowner. The other thing to take note of is professional applicator will never apply anything in this type of shape or fashion. They will be more uniform, right? So these dancing, twirling dervish shapes that have been left on the lawn is something we also look for when homeowners call about issues with pesticide applications. A vast majority of professional applicators are going to give you a much more uniform and even coverage. So again, make sure you're aware of what the product says it will do on the label, and make sure you're aware of where the product should be applied and should not be applied when you are taking it on. And if you're using something for the first time, recommend that you put it in a small area. Same idea as if you use a cream on your skin for the first time, or anything like that. Small area that's not going to cause any large issues, and you can evaluate it for a couple of days and then come back in and take a look at it and see if it's done any damage to something you want to keep. So that's my little blurb today. Dr. Carr has a finishing screen share with our contact details. On the bottom there, you can see the link to the soil moisture sensors. the various links, and also the podcast. Those of you who want to listen along and have desperately got nothing else to listen to while you're driving around in your cars, other than us waffle on. With that, I will bid you all adieu. Dr. Gardner, Dr. Carr, Mr. Hicks, Dr. Shetlar, thank you so very much for your time, and we will talk to you all next week.